Welcome back to another edition of Through the Smoke, a Miami Hurricanes football and recruiting podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Network. David Lake joined as always by Gabby Urrutia. We're here to preview a massive rivalry game between Miami and Florida. Number 4 Miami hosting Florida, 1 and 2 Florida. Of course, it's going to be a 7:30 Eastern Time kickoff, uh, Saturday, September 20th. Before we jump into things, you guys know the drill. We got to highlight two of our sponsors. Canes Connection, uh, Miami's collective plays a massive role in the roster looking this way. Top 5 team that looks like a top 5 team. Your support to the collective, to Canes Connection, is crucial in this regard. So go support those guys at canesconnection.com. Also, Musarino Law. If you've been injured in any type of accident, go hit up Nick Musarino of Musarino Law. The way to get in touch with him will be in the show notes. All right, Gabby. So let's just set the table a little bit. Miami's going to have a spotlight on them this week as they host Florida. ESPN's weekly show, College Game Day, is going to be broadcast from the lakeside patio on campus. This is the 9th time Game Day has been to Miami for a game, and the Hurricanes have a 7-1 record in those games. The last time College Game Day was at a Miami home game, was in 2017 against Notre Dame. That was also broadcasted at the lakeside patio on campus. ACC Network will broadcast their shows ACC PM on the university's foot green, which is kind of like in the middle of campus, just a big green space from 5 to 7 o'clock on Friday. And then ACC Huddle Live, which is their kind of ACC Saturday pre game show from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. in that same location on Saturday morning. Look, Abby, this is why Miami went all in on hiring Mario Cristobal. You can't put a price on this type of promotion, marketing for your school beyond just the football program. And we're going to talk about how this is a great recruiting tool here in a second, but just the school in general is going to get a 3-hour commercial on ESPN. The campus is going to look like a resort. It's the best advertising and marketing you could ask for. So again, of course, this is awesome for the school or for the football program, but it's bigger than that. It's awesome for the school, and President Joe Echeverria understands that. Fortunately, Miami has a president that gets that part of the importance of a strong football program and athletic department. All right, Gabby. So, this is going to be a recruiting tool in general for the university, but also, of course, with Miami hosting a uh, big rivalry game that has that national spotlight on it this week. It's a big recruiting weekend for the football program. You've been churning out lots of stuff this week on the website, kind of highlighting and hinting who's expected to come. So set the table now. Who are just some of the names that Miami fans should know going into this weekend?
There are a ton of names. Recruiting going on all around Coral Gables this weekend. It's going to be massive. I think some of the biggest names that I think Miami fans need to be aware of, especially when it kind of comes to this class of 2026. A ton of the commits are going to be in attendance. Jackson Cantwell included of that group, of course, the five-star offensive lineman. But when it comes to some of the top flip guys, you got Anthony Jones, the Oregon commit, pass rusher out of Alabama who visited for the Notre Dame game as well. He's back in Miami, so that's a huge deal. Justice Fitzpatrick out of St. Thomas Aquinas in Fort Lauderdale, committed to Georgia. He's a defensive back target that Miami's trying to flip. Nolan Wilson, a defensive lineman out of Alabama, out of Mississippi, I'm sorry, committed to the University of Alabama. He's someone that Miami was working on into the summer months, and it kind of came down to the Tide and the Canes, and he committed to Alabama, but Miami's still working on that one. Tyreek Green is a Georgia commit out of Buford, Georgia. A guy he's a three-phase player. If you haven't watched his tape, would encourage you to do so. It's a ton of fun. A couple, defensive tackle type of prospects, nose tackle type of prospects. Isaiah Broughton, who's like a 6'3 and a half, 300-pound defensive tackle who was committed to UNLV. His older brother was a defensive tackle at the University of Texas, so good bloodlines and massive size. And then Frederick Saintis out of David Lake's neck of the woods there in Naples, big body. I hadn't seen him in person until last week when he visited, and he's definitely got size. A Haitian-born defensive lineman who's playing his high school football there on the Southwest Coast. Was originally going to visit Florida State. He's coming to Miami again for the second week in a row. So I think that that's a nice, encouraging sign about where things are at there. But it's huge when it comes to this 2026 class and these potential flip guys. I think that's really going to be the story of the weekend. I know that's what's going to generate more of the most of the buzz. There's more potential flip candidates, flip guys, flip targets that are coming. I think Calvin Russell is someone who is expected in, still working through that one, but it sounds to me like the expectation is he will be back. So that's another potential big flip target. A couple more guys that, we'll see if they follow through and if we get the clearance or confirmation to release those names, definitely will. But I think there's a couple big names, interesting names that might be pulling up as well that I think are going to excite the fan base for this Miami, Florida game. So stay tuned for that. And this 2027 class is just unbelievably loaded as far as this visit list. The wide receivers have gotten a lot of attention. It's like 11 of the top 20 wide receivers in the country, including like
Crazy.
the top four receivers, the number six receiver, eight receiver, 11. It just goes on. It's nuts. It's pretty nuts. And Miami has needed to, we've talked about it, David. Miami's needed to take that step at receiver as far as like from a recruiting perspective, like start getting into it with these elite guys. And it seems like after back-to-back years of really impressive offensive play, it seems like a lot of those elite wide receivers are taking notice. I want to explore this option. So great opportunity for those guys, some big key line of scrimmage guys. DJ Jacobs and Derwin Fields are two top 50 players. DJ Jacobs is like the number one overall edge rusher in the country, and this is his second visit this year. Big deal. He's a Georgia legacy out of, kind of like the Atlanta area. And Derwin Fields is a kid out of Mississippi who's another freak show type of talent. So it's loaded. I mean, truly, like, again, if you're not on InsideU.com right now, like, it's wild. You need to go check out this visitors list. I mean, in our time, I feel like we've run into this situation a few times before, and maybe in hindsight, it's always easier to figure it out. But this is as loaded as any recruiting
Yeah.
event has been here at Miami during this Mario Cristobal era. I think with more context with years to pass, we can kind of nail it down a little bit better. But in the moment, the way this looks on paper, again, I think this is as big as it gets anywhere in the country for any individual game day. So a lot of positive buzz coming through Coral Gables this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, look, Mario Cristobal, it's been well documented. He's one of the best recruiters in the country. And one of the reasons why he is beyond just the day-to-day effort, right? He understands like recruiting's a lot about buzz and pouncing on those buzz opportunities.
Yep.
And Miami is a buzzworthy program right now. They will have a spotlight on them this weekend, playing against a bitter rival, both on the field this weekend, but also mainly on the recruiting trail because they don't play every year, but they do recruit against each other every year. So it's a big opportunity to pounce, and this is what this staff does best. When there is buzz, they make the most of those situations. You mentioned the young wide receivers taking notice, the 2027 group. Look, this is obvious, but like when you have guys like Josh Moore and Malachi Tony making plays as true freshmen, it makes it really easy to recruit because all you got to do is say, watch the game. So we'll see how that position continues to level up. I think, obviously Malachi and Josh are an example of how it's leveling up already. But the challenge now is stacking talent. All right, let's turn the page over to the game. And let's start, our usual format, injury talk. We'll discuss some of the buzz there with the injuries. I think mainly the two guys to know from a Miami standpoint, running back Jordan Lyle, wide receiver JoJo Trader. Mario Cristobal said, as he kind of always does, and I would always take it with a grain of salt, but I think it's encouraging that he said both guys are going to be good to go this week. He also said that last week. So again, I would take it with a grain of salt. I would just like if I'm gonna NFL injury report classify this, I would still put them both as questionable because I would put them as questionable from the standpoint of I think you have to manage their situations in a way that allows them to be at their best for the long term. So for the whole season. Would it be great if both those guys were good to go and significant contributors on Saturday? Absolutely. And if they're at that point, then great, play them. I think it's more important though to have those guys because Miami has a bye week after the Florida game, and I think it's more important to almost have those guys good to go, fully 100% rested for Florida State. So I would still classify them as questionable. And frankly, like as it relates to Jordan Lyle, yes, he started the year as the starter. I think no matter what, though, like your horse in this game is going to be Mark Fletcher. And then, with JoJo Trader, Miami hasn't really had him fully healthy, uh, this season. So, um, I would slowly work him into things as well. Florida, on the other side, Caleb Banks, their massively talented defensive tackle. He was coming off an injury going into the LSU game. He played in that game, and it looks like he re-injured that foot injury. I would say he's doubtful. He's probably just straight up out. Billy Napier, of course, wouldn't straight up say, but he did say, like, this is a serious injury. He's going to be out. I forget his phrasing, but he kind of implied multiple weeks. So he's likely out. Wide receiver Dallas Wilson, look, we will see. He's a true freshman, talented, explosive, big body. I think Florida was really counting on him to be a downfield threat this year. They're missing some downfield threat at the outside receiver spots, and not having him, I think, is hurting them. Uh, we'll see if he's healthy or not, ready to go. He sustained an injury in camp and hasn't played yet this year. On the broadcast for the LSU game, Greg McElroy or McDonough, I forget which one, kind of hinted that from that point, it seemed like he was going to be out, quote unquote, a few more weeks. So, they talk to the coaches about all these situations. And I would think that's a fair way to assess that going into this week. Um, with this game, Miami holds the all-time edge between the two programs, 30-27. Hurricanes won last year's meeting 41-17 to open the year in the swamp. Miami won the last game in Miami Gardens back in 2013, 21-16. So this is the last game in the series for the foreseeable future. There's nothing scheduled regular season wise between these schools for the future. So it'd have to be like a CFP matchup or a bowl game matchup. And this century, so since 2000, Miami owns a 6-2 record against the Gators. Let's discuss Florida in a big picture way. UF, Florida is coming into this game with a 1-2 record. They started the year ranked 15th. They then lost to USF in week 2, 18-16. They last week lost to number 3 LSU, 20-10. Their head coach, of course, is Billy Napier. He is now 20-21 at Florida, and he's 10-15 in SEC play. Dan Mullen, who Napier replaced, went 34-15 in his 4 seasons at UF with a 21-14 SEC record. Napier previously, of course, was at Louisiana. He went 40-12 there. Prior to that, he was an OC at Arizona State. He was at Alabama with Mario Cristobal as their wide receivers coach from 2013 to 2016. He was also Dabo Sweeney's, I believe, first offensive coordinator at Clemson from 2009 2010. Billy is UF's play caller. It's his offense. This offense, I think you would classify it as like balanced or maybe even like pro style. Runs a lot of 12 personnel, aspires to be balanced, to me, like this offense runs it's like a low margin for error offense. When his plays hit, the play designs are beautiful, but everything kind of has to go right on the individual plays to hit. Um, so it hasn't been clicking so far to this point, and the offense looks quite bad. Defensive coordinator Rod Roberts is in his second year at Florida. He's kind of like a lifer. He's worked his way up in the coaching ranks. His stints were at recently Auburn, Baylor. He was at Louisiana with Billy Napier as well. And before that, he was at kind of other small schools, 1AA or D2 schools. He does have that side playing well right now in his second year at Florida. Their stats. So offense, 27 points per game. That's 79th in the country. 390 yards per game. That's 67th in the country. 5 yards per play. That's 87th in the country. They are allowing 7.6 tackles for loss per game, which is 122nd in the country. They got off to a really bad start in week one against Long Island University. I believe they allowed 11 tackles for loss in that game. They have lost 6 turnovers on the year, which is 115th nationally. Interesting stat, time of possession. They're holding the ball for 35 seconds, 35 minutes, 29 seconds. That's sixth in the country. 40.5% on third down. That's 77th. 66% red zone touchdown rate. That's 54th nationally. Just in general, when you look at the advanced stats, they are much more successful on a down to down basis when running the ball. Uh, to me, their best player is Jaden Baugh, who's only getting 12 carries a game. So, you know, that's something they got to figure out whether or not they want to change. Defensively, 12.7 points per game. That's 26 nationally. Just 2 touchdowns allowed by the defense. Uh, 264 yards per game. That's 28th. Really good run defense to this point, 87 rushing yards per game. That's 23rd nationally. 6.2 yards per play, which is 101st nationally. That's not impressive, of course. 0.67 sacks per game. That's 123. So their pass rush is a lot to be desired at this point. They're allowing 26.2% on third down. That's 20th nationally. 16 red zone touchdown rate, 16% red zone touchdown rate. That's seventh in the country. In general, Florida's run defense is elite. Their pass defense looks to be kind of average with a poor pass rush. The numbers indicate kind of like a big bend but don't break style on a down to down basis. They aren't very good, but they do bow up in the red zone. That yards per play number is particularly startling because they are allowing a lot of yards per play, but their points allowed don't necessarily reflect that. Special teams kicker is Trace Mack, who is 6-9 on the year. He's been a solid college kicker in his career. He went 18 of 21 last year, 17 of 21 the year before. Tommy Doman is the punter. He's a transfer from Michigan, 45 yards per punt. Vernell Brown is the primary kick and punt returner, true freshman, impressive, talented wide receiver. He's averaging 18 yards per attempt on 7 attempts as a punt returner. He's generated a few explosives in that regard already this year. So Miami's coverage units are going to have to be on point. All right, let's talk a little bit more about their personnel, Gabby. I think we got to start with the conversation surrounding DJ Lagway because Florida coming into this year was kind of built like, okay, they're going to succeed as much as DJ Lagway takes that next step this year. That was expected of him. He flashed a lot as a true freshman. Um, and look, it's obviously not going well for DJ right now. I think his off season coming into this year has kind of derailed things because he's needed shoulder surgery. He's had other issues related to his body and didn't really get much work. Frankly, through a lot of fall camp. So from January through midway fall camp, DJ Lagway had not taken 11 on 11 reps at Florida. And so it looks like a big perfect storm of like the chemistry, they're out of sync. Um, he's hurt a little. I don't know if he's hurt, but he just doesn't look right physically in some ways too. And look, when Lagway's elite, his elite is elite. And um, he's at his best when he's pushing the ball downfield. And so what a lot of teams are doing, or what USF and LSU has done, is they are kind of showing too high safety looks, which is daring Lagway to throw it into those looks downfield. And when he does, he's getting picked off quite a bit. It also forces DJ Lagway to be more of a patient and precise thrower. And that's also where he's struggling as it relates to accuracy. So it's a lot of issues going on with him right now. I think it's a fair conversation to have. Like, okay, when does Lagway click? When do things click for him? Because I do think eventually he's going to settle in and be okay. As it relates to this game, though, typically you just don't see huge jumps like that from a quarterback in 1 week. So if he does improve this week, I would expect, marginal small improvements. And I think the goal would be to see that from a Florida perspective, see those improvements over 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. But right now, his processing, decision making issues, accuracy issues, a lot of his picks are coming when he's not even pressured. So there's a lot of issues going on there, but he does flash some special throwing ability at times. And so that does make him dangerous. When you watch Florida this year, what do you notice about him, Gabby?
That to me, it looks like a guy who's, I mean, it's kind of what everyone's talking about. He just looks off rhythm. It looks like all of those things that you mentioned, the offseason surgery, the not throwing, that's challenging, man, to not be able to be with your guys again, even into fall camp. Trey Wilson was a guy I think that missed some time in fall camp. So it's also kind of like a new receiving core. You got a true freshman in Vernell Brown who's implemented into the offense with Trey Wilson, who, missed some time. You got a transfer in J. Michael Sturdivant, who you hadn't really had time to, gel with on the field. And there's a lot of newness in that offense. And you kind of mix that up with it looks more like more than a shoulder. I feel like his lower half is out of whack too. Like I feel like his feet are all over the place. It doesn't look like he's even like driving the ball super well. Um, I don't know. It seems like a collection of things that are just not going right for him. It seems like something's just off, and you expect again at some point that this is going to click and this is going to work out. But I'm honestly just curious how healthy he is. Like, how much does he actually have to like? I don't know. I feel like he's a couple plays away, a couple hits from being like. Again, I'm just speculating from what I see. It doesn't seem to me like he has the same like kind of juice. I definitely don't think he has the same confidence.
Yeah.
To your point too, I think teams are kind of playing him back and they're forcing him to kind of process. And I think there's times where he kind of gets stuck on the decision that he kind of seemed to have has made in his head already of where he was going to go with the ball, and he kind of tries to like force it. And that first interception against LSU kind of comes to mind where he forces a ball with there's three LSU defenders around the Florida pass catcher. And again, he wasn't under like duress or heavy pressure. I think he just knew he decided where he was going with it and that's where he threw it. So I think it's interesting what DJ Lagway is when you have to kind of force him to process and force him to kind of look around and get to his second and third reads. I think when he gets into those positions, it's not it's I don't know, to me I think that's where he gets himself into trouble. So yeah, he seems like a guy who needs some sort of confidence. I don't know where that comes from. It's a tough road, going on the road and playing LSU, the Miami game, and all the hype that this thing is generating. Hard Rock's going to be loud. It's not 100,000 people strong, but the 67, 68 that are in there are going to bring it. And then you got Texas and Texas A&M. Like it's a tough slate. So I'm just curious when this kind of clicks for DJ Lagway, if it does in this year, and truly just how healthy is he, honestly? Because it doesn't look to me like he's at 100%.
Yeah, the athleticism and the conditioning also looks like it
Yeah,
isn't at a point where it should be.
he's not
And
moving super well, I feel like either. Like to me,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that can be explained by, being held out, but
yeah,
a lot of the off season, and he's got calf issues, which I think is scary,
yep.
as it relates to the Achilles. So it's just a mess kind of right now with him. And the goal now needs to be little gains, little marginal gains week to week to week. Let's talk about the rest of their personnel. To me, Jaden Baugh, their running back, he is their best player on offense. It's a problem because he's only averaging about 12 carries per game. But when he does get the ball in his hands, you can see the vision, the power, the burst. It's different. He's maybe not as like explosive
Mhm.
as Jeremiah Love, but honestly, like for me, I put him in that same caliber of like elite running back talent. And if it were me, if I was Billy Napier this week, I'd do everything I could to just put the ball in his hands, protect DJ Lagway.
Mhm.
He's also very dangerous in the screen game. 7 catches for 59 yards. He had a long touchdown
Yep.
called back in which DJ extended a play. There was a holding penalty on the Florida offensive line, which was a holding. But anyways, to me, he's the key for UF this week against Miami. I think they need to get him going. Anything stand out to you about
Yeah.
him?
To your point, I think a big key to even getting Lagway kind of back on pace is by establishing a running game with Jaden Ball because, yeah, he's super talented, a really, really good player, a strong physical runner, and he brings that pass catching element to the game too. Like, he's someone that I think Florida needs to just kind of go all in on and be like, you're our guy. And I feel like if Jaden Ball is successful, like it relieves so much pressure and opens things up more for DJ Lagway. So I think that's the direction that Florida should go in. That's like as far as offensively to try to dig themselves out of this situation. I mean, 10 points against LSU and 16 points against USF. Like they're not being productive or efficient on offense. And I think a big part of that could just be unlocking that run game. 12 carries for a guy like Jaden Ball is not enough. And what DJ Lagway had like 49 pass attempts against LSU, or
Yeah.
I
I
know
mean,
some of
part
them
of
was
that
at
is
at
like,
the end you're trailing, right? Like I
yeah,
get
yeah,
that, but still, I mean, if this guy's your best player, he's your best player, and
yeah. They should lean on him more early in games.
definitely.
So, uh, pass catchers. So we've talked about Vernell Brown, true freshman, dangerous slot receiver. He's a different type of slot receiver than Malachi Tony, but super talented, similar level of talent, and he's their best player. You and I saw him a lot in high
Hmm.
school, Gabby, and it's really no surprise that he's kind of doing what he's doing. Trey Wilson, a stud with the ball in his hands. Can he actually play receiver, or is he more of like a jet sweep,
Hmm.
gadget guy, quick screen type of dude? But when he has the ball in his hands, he's dangerous, dynamic. Their top outside receiver right now is J. Michael Sturdivant, who was a Cal and UCLA guy that transferred to Florida. To me, to this point, like he looks like nothing special. Need Florida needed him to be impactful
Hmm.
and be kind of a downfield threat, but just hasn't really stepped up in a considerable way. To me, like Aiden Mizell, who's another like
Hmm.
he's kind of a rotational outside receiver. He flashes some explosiveness, and I'm intrigued by him. And then their tight ends, Hayden Hanson. We talked about how they're 12 personnel a lot of times. Hayden Hanson, kind of your 6'8" all around tight end. He never leaves the field. He's important to what they do from a blocking standpoint and from a pass game standpoint. And then Tony Livingston, he's like their number 2 tight end. Uh, when he comes in, you got to ID him because he is kind of used in their downfield passing game. When they throw it off play actions or misdirections in those 12 personnel looks. So the pass catchers, Gabby, what do you want to say about those guys?
Yeah, I mean that group again. I think there's a lot of different. I think Vernell Brown is electric, right? We thought that. I mean, he was a top guy for Miami last year. I think we see a lot of the traits that Miami was kind of enamored with. That what he does as a punt returner. You mentioned it. It's big time. Whenever the ball's in his hands, he's someone that can make a play. So Vernell Brown to me is their guy on offense as far as just the pass catchers. He's had opportunities to stretch the field. We talked about it in that USF game. He didn't complete that. He didn't follow through with that, but he created separation and gets open, so he can stretch it, and then he can kind of beat you in the middle and in those crossers. He's a load to deal with, and then uh, again, Trey Wilson's kind of like that to me, kind of like that side to side, like horizontal type of guy that they'll try to find ways to kind of dink it, dump it to him, or hand it off to him, and all that stuff. But in general, the receivers are. Um, to me, again, J. Michael Sturdivant was the guy I was kind of concerned about because he was kind of like that big play chunk guy. But like year over year, just comparing it to kind of like the guy they got last year in Elijah Badger, like I think Elijah Badger was better for them than J. Michael Sturdivant
And
is
DK.
for, yeah, and DK. So. I don't know. I'm not like super enamored by this group, but Trey Wilson, Vernell Brown is the one that I think put like gets me going, I guess, a little bit. Just he's
Yeah,
the
he's
one
good.
he's the one that moves the needle for me.
The offensive line, to me, like if we're talking just position groups, this is their best unit on offense. They're big, long bodies, veteran guys, played a lot of football. They're good in pass protection. To me, like Austin Barber, who's their left tackle, their center, Jake Slaughter, they're going to be NFL starters down the road as pros. Damian George, to me, is a massive right guard, and I think he probably gets drafted late too. So anytime you got three draft picks on the offensive line, you're probably a good group. I'm not personally, and against LSU there was some struggles here when I watched the game, but I'm not much of a Najee Harris guy, the left guard. He's kind of their most undersized guy on the offensive line. Everyone else looks the part physically. Najee Harris is kind of more your 6'2", 6'3", 300-pound interior offensive lineman. The right tackle is kind of an issue too.
Hmm.
They appear to have settled on Caden Jones, uh, who I think is the right call there. He didn't start the year as the starting right tackle. He was a rotational guy, but against LSU, he started and he goes 6'8", 333. So he's another massive guy. It just seems like philosophically, right? Like Mario Cristobal believes in big, strong, powerful offensive linemen. So does Billy Napier. So the body types look similar in that regard. I think pass pro, this offensive line is quite good. Say whatever you want about PFF grades, right?
Hmm.
But like I do think Florida has graded out as the ninth best pass protection group in the country going into this game. The run blocking, I think there's more meat on the bone for them to improve relative to how big they are. Uh, but I am impressed by their offensive line.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a big, strong-looking offensive line. That right tackle situation, they definitely had to sort out. But I mean, Austin Barber has been a steady piece on this Florida offensive line for a while. Jake Slaughter is as good as you get, as good as it gets at the center position. In college football, he's a very, very talented center, and again, the size it just all lines up. So, again, you look at the PFF stuff, and you can get caught up in a lot of those things. Again, I know that right tackle situation they got to figure out, and I definitely think it's something that Miami could continue to test and
Yeah.
try to just continue to kind of push that situation, especially with how good Miami's pass rushers and how good that situation has been for between whether it's Ruben Bain or Akeem Mesidor working on both those guys. And still, I even think with Austin Barber, like I think that's going to be a really really awesome challenge in the trenches between Bain and Mesidor and Austin Barber because I think that could be one where both sides have great reps and just good looks against one another. I think that's going to be a nice. I think just that battle in the trenches is in general is going to be a lot of fun. Miami's defensive line against again, it is a good offensive line for Florida, so it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and as we talk about the right tackle situation, it is a weak point, but Florida does ask their tight end, Hayden Hansen, who again goes a shade under 6'8", 270, to help that side a lot of times too. So it's not just something that you could totally take advantage of all the time because
Right.
they will ask Hayden Hansen to help. Defensively, look, I think Florida, their body types look the part on the defensive line across the board. The pass rush isn't necessarily showing up like I would think they would hope. We talked about the sack numbers earlier. Those numbers just aren't there. The pressure rates too, frankly, just aren't there. George Gums and Tyreek Sapp return as their top edge guys from last year. I think Sapp in particular ended the year last year on a really strong note. I don't know if he's necessarily picked up from that point to the start of this season. To me, his strength is more, setting the edge against the run and helping in that regard. I would probably say the same against George Gums, who no, George Gums is an interesting story. He was a former wide receiver and, just kept getting bigger, adding good weight, and he, switched to defense and is now a pass rusher. He looks like an athletic edge rusher, but the production just isn't there right now. So I would say he's probably been a better run defender than pass rusher to the start of this year as well. We mentioned Caleb Banks, like he is when healthy and all that, he's a first round pick at
Yeah.
defensive tackle, 6'6", 340, athletic. And he was making an impact in that LSU game when he was in. But foot problems for a guy that big are serious. So I'd be surprised if he gave it a go. So there are two guys that, after Caleb Banks on the interior, Jamari Lyons. He was injured last year, I believe. He's kind of a bigger body too, 6'3", 6'4", 310, 315. And then Brendan Bet is the Baylor transfer, massive body type as well,
Hmm.
6'5", 320. He's the guy that spit on the USF player at the end of that game. And, that penalty, of course, helped USF go win that game. They're also missing LJ McCray, who, we talked about how they were really counting on Dallas Wilson to be a threat on the outside as a deep ball guy, as a true freshman. LJ McCray, former five-star recruit, they were counting on him to kind of be an impact player this year, and
Hmm.
he's hurt and not going to be good to go. There at the linebacker level, Miles Graham really flashes to me. To me, he's their best player on defense. A true sideline to sideline linebacker, runs all over the field, makes tackles. I think he's their best player on defense. Their corners are pretty looking. Devin Moore, 6'3", 200-pound corner. He got hurt against LSU, and injuries have kind of been a part of his story in college. So, you know, that's worth monitoring, I think, pregame. But um, he is a good player when he's healthy and good to go. Cormani McLean started against LSU, the former five-star recruit. Dijon Johnson had a pick against LSU. And then nickel Sharif Denson, I think, is a very good nickel. So they have talented guys in the secondary at corner. Their safeties to me are just kind of dependable veteran types with a lot of snaps, Bryce Thornton and Jordan Castell. Are they like big time playmaker types? Probably not. But again, at safety, you just want guys you can depend on. And I think those two guys are fairly dependable. With their defensive personnel, Gabby, what jumps out to you? Because I think there's talent, length, body
Yeah.
types looked apart, speeds there. Um, what jumps out at you?
Yeah, I think the size, right? I think that this is you talk about just like an SEC looking defense. You mentioned all those guys that could potentially be all right. Caleb Banks, LJ McCray. I mean, someone else that jumped out to me just along their defensive front is Cameron James, who was a
Yeah,
blue chip guy out of Orlando. In that first half of that LSU game, I thought that there were some really impressive flashes from him. He's a huge guy. What's his? I mean, he was big and high, 6'6", 270. A guy that
yeah,
kind of, I think that he gives them a lot. David, I don't know if you know the status of Micah Burrow. I know he's someone. I know he missed the LSU game. He started at nose tackle for them against Long Island and against USF. I think he went out of that USF. He came out of that USF game, and then he didn't play against LSU. So I don't know what his status is going into this. But that's another big body that if he's not
right.
able to go, like that's another. They just got so many guys. You mentioned the Brandon Beck guy and how big he is, and then you got Micah Burrow, who's another 6'4", 350 pounds. Like they just got size and mass all over that defensive line. Is it super twitchy? Which is kind of what we talked about last year. Like this is probably not like the twitchiest,
No,
go get the quarterback type of defensive line, but this defensive line has size, and it's not a surprise to me that people are kind of struggling to run against them because with guys with that mass and when they can move, like it kind of clogs those lanes. So I am curious to see how it impacts that. But yeah, I think the size and they got a decent rotation of guys. Obviously thinner with some of these guys out and potentially out, but they're getting some okay reps from a guy like Jeremiah McLeod, who's a true freshman for them. He's kind of getting on the field. They got bodies and they've recruited that defensive line pretty well. So there are definitely options that are still able to be productive. Jaden Woods is a true freshman out of Kansas that's playing for them. Like he's getting on the field and getting reps for them. So they have talent for sure. At the linebacker level, to me, it's Miles Graham. Like he's not the biggest guy, but he's a missile, and he kind of flies around, and
yeah,
he can move, and he can run, and he can do different things. So I think he's an exciting type of linebacker to have. They got some depth too. Who is it? Childs or Gates? Childs? Pup Howard is I don't is he healthy? What happened there? I thought he was going to be a stud. but I don't know. Is he playing a lot? Like, I'm not sure what's
It
going on there.
seems like he might have got beat out.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
surprised. I mean, like, I was so I saw him on, I was looking through the stuff. I was like, wow, I kind of forgot that he was there. Like, he's a talented player that had a really good true freshman season at South Carolina, and then, the secondary, of course, is talented with, Dejon Johnson and Cormani McLean. Like, those were two of the best cornerbacks in the state coming out. Sharif Denson is now kind of like an older veteran nickel, that's been playing good ball for them too, and they got guys to kind of rotate through Devin Moore and all the guys you mentioned. And then I agree with you about the safeties, but I think that this is a talented defense. Like they got talent all over this defense, and there are guys and their size, and it's going to be interesting. I think that this Florida defense is probably better than I think people give them credit for.
yeah, I got to credit Nick De La Torre for this tweet, but I think this is an impressive stat. Florida has held opponents scoreless on their first drive in 11 straight games and hasn't allowed any first quarter points in 7 straight
Wow.
games. So their defense is playing good enough to be 3-0. The
Mhm.
offense, of course, is dropping the ball. Um, Gabby, I want to go through a little exercise. Let's just
Yeah.
put each other on the spot. I haven't thought about this, but I'm curious what conclusions we would come to. I want to go position by position and just off the top of your head, you can, better or worse or the same, even than Notre Dame at each position group,
Mm. Okay.
this Florida team. I'll start us off. Quarterback, I'll I'll say even. I think maybe you could jump to the conclusion that CJ Carr's better, but I'm gonna say even.
I'm gonna be that guy, and I'm gonna say CJ Carr.
Okay. I would have pushed back on that. Running back, honestly, man, I would say even.
I would go Notre Dame just because I think the number two running back. I think there's a pretty gap. I
That's
think there's
fair.
a sizable gap between Jadarian Price and the Jackson kid.
That's fair. I'll join you with that. I'll go Notre Dame. Receiver, I'll go Notre Dame.
Hmm.
Tight end, I think Florida's tight ends are better.
Yeah, I think they got two good ones, like two solid guys.
Offensive line, I would go Florida.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I mean, against Miami, Notre Dame's wasn't good, and I don't know if they were very good against Texas A&M either. I think it's probably fair to go Florida there.
Defensive line, I think I'd go Florida.
Yeah. I actually had this conversation with someone this week, and I think,
The bodies are better. Both
yeah,
those lines can't pass rush. They can't.
yeah.
Neither one of them.
I think Notre Dame has the better pass rusher of the two,
Yes.
and I think Florida being a little bit dinged up might go might go
That interior
Notre
is
Dame.
bad for Notre Dame. It's
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. But I think the Boubacar Traore kid is probably the best player of either one of those two groups. Honestly, I might just I just think
Even.
they're stylistically they're different. I think they're kind of different they're different defensive lines. Obviously Florida has more mass. Yeah,
Which one
maybe
would you
Florida.
rather have? Because I'd rather have Florida's.
Yeah, I'd rather have Florida's interior guys, but I'd probably rather have Notre Dame's edge rushers.
Right. So which one would you rather have?
It's tough. It's tough. Yeah, I mean, I guess Florida.
Linebacker. To me, Miles Graham is better than anything Notre Dame has, but I probably like Notre Dame's group.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll say
The Notre Dame group is nice, but the Florida group has been playing well. Like
right.
I feel like the names aren't as big. Like I think Drake Bowen got a ton of buzz, and the kid that's been there forever that was a 5 star. I can't remember the other Notre Dame linebacker's name. Um, but if Florida, I mean, watching that Florida linebacker core, like those guys are good, and just
Yeah.
pure production. Miles Graham has been awesome, and they got some guys too. Like that's potentially a push for me. Maybe I'd lean Florida, honestly.
Okay. Corner, I think, is very interesting, right? Because
Hmm.
look, Leonard Moore's a stud for Notre Dame. And certainly Notre Dame had a lot of rightful buzz coming into that Miami game. But through 2 weeks, Notre Dame's secondary has
Yeah,
been a disaster.
right.
So let's just say secondary. Let's not go corners,
Hmm.
safeties. Let's just say secondary. Secondary wise, man, I think you got to go Florida.
Yeah, based on what's happened, I mean, they've gotten. They definitely have not lived up to what Notre Dame has not lived up to what everyone thought they were going to be coming in. And obviously lose a couple guys, but there's a lot of talent on that Notre Dame secondary. Just like But yeah, the Florida secondary has been good. Like it's been better for sure. They had that one bust against USF during like kind of like an awkward defensive
Right.
substitution, but otherwise they've been really good. And they played against an SEC group of wide receivers that are pretty loaded with Barry and Brown and Nick Anderson and Aaron Anderson, and all those guys. The Thomas kid, who wears number 0, who's an awesome player. They've been tested and they held up. Like I think just for those reasons, I would go Florida. But on paper, like that Notre Dame group was supposed to be special. It just hasn't played out that way.
Yeah. So look, I don't even know what we can take from this exercise because I think part of this conversation is just like Notre Dame might not be as good as Miami would hope after winning that. I mean, it's a great week 1 win. Don't get me
Right.
wrong. But like, I guess the main point is like, look, man, like
Yeah.
Notre Dame and Florida, they're both good,
Hmm.
talented teams.
For sure.
I mean, between the two of them, they only have 1 win, but like, I wouldn't necessarily look at Florida as being significantly worse than Notre Dame, I
Yeah.
guess is my point. What does
I'm
that mean? I don't know.
I'm with you. And look, there were times where it was a struggle for Miami's offense in that Notre Dame game. And I think that there are going to be times in this game against Florida where it's going to be a grind for Miami's offense. Like, I think that that part of it is still something that people need to kind of hear and be aware of that, like, Florida, yeah, it has potential disaster. This could be a potential
Yeah.
disaster situation for them, but there's also a world where this team plays hard. And if this team plays really hard, like this is a talented enough defense, at least, that is worthy of a ton of respect. And I think internally, just having conversations with people this week, like I think that Miami's like approaching this team and as specifically,
Yeah, as
this
they should.
defense as like this is an elite group and like they're going to be
Yes.
extremely challenging. They're concerned about the way that they kind of play, the way they structure their scheme and how they kind of bracket the slots and they bracket the, field X and like how it's going to be challenging for guys like CJ Daniels and Malachi Tony to, find space to operate. And they're going to have to, they're very concerned about what Florida can potentially do on defense. Like Miami's not sleeping on this Florida team the way, I think maybe as a casual person, you're
The
looking at
fans
this
are.
game, yeah, and you're saying, oh, this is a 1-2 Florida team. They, DJ Lagway threw 5 picks. It's like, this is a good football team. This is a good defense. And, it's good. It could potentially be a grind. Like, it can be challenging. Miami's
Right.
offense has been really good and it's been efficient, and I would love nothing more than Miami to come out and score a first quarter touchdown and score on the first drive.
Right.
They've been
That'd
efficient
be a
on
good
offense.
sign.
I think this is going to be a nice little clash of strengths because Miami has come out of the gate kind of hot. And they've been able to kind of get on the field and perform at least over the last 2 games. So we're gonna see how this Miami offense responds to again a defense that I think is good and worthy of the respect of the people.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then the on the other side, we'll discuss this game a little bit more from the Miami perspective. All right, we are back. Um, Gabby, I'm just going to roll through like 3 things I want to see from Miami, and then at the end, if you want to add anything, cool. Uh, so I'm going to start with Carson Beck, right? Miami's quarterback. And this is somewhat of an obvious thing, but I think it applies in a big way to Miami being able to win this game. Carson Beck making good decisions when he's pressured. We've seen, I mean, this goes back to his time at Georgia. Beck is surgical when he has time to operate. And through these first 3 games, we've also kind of seen like, and some of these things have hit, some of these things have not, that when he is pressured, the decision making can get a little wild at times. It can be a wild ride. Um, now, from a luckily Miami standpoint, he's only been pressured on 12.8% of his dropbacks this season. And when he is pressured, he's 6 of 9 for 90 yards with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Now, those are excellent numbers, but you could argue, look, one of those touchdowns was aided in a significant way by a ridiculous CJ Daniels catch,
Mhm.
which would have been picked off, right? And then you could have that conversation of, okay, was that a good decision? So you are playing the result there to some extent, but it worked out. And then the one interception was just a really bad decision in which he forced it downfield. Again, I said in the last podcast, in some ways, it might be a good thing that he got that out of his system, hopefully against USF, and won't do that against a better opponent in Florida. You look at last year's game against Florida. Beck threw for 309 yards with 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions in that game. Georgia won that game. But UF's approach that day against Beck was to get after him. They blitzed him on 56% of his dropbacks, and he went 11 of 22 for 163 and 2 touchdowns
Mm.
and 2 interceptions when he was blitzed. He had 3 turnover-worthy plays when he was blitzed too. That was also Florida's approach last year against Cam Ward. They blitzed Cam Ward on 60% of his dropbacks, and he was just incredible when they blitzed him. Um, he burned he burned that defense all game long. He completed 17 of 21 passes against Florida's blitz
Oof.
for 308 and 2 touchdowns. So, but again, they're different styles of quarterbacks, right? Like Cam Ward is that playmaker that can get that done against blitz looks. I think Carson Beck flashes that ability too, but he's also, the interceptions are there as well on the flip side. So I'm curious to see in general, like what UF's approach is this year, this week, because so far to this point, they've blitzed much less year over year. They blitzed Byron Brown on 35% of his dropbacks, the USF quarterback, and they blitzed Nussmeier, or I'm sorry, Nussmeier 35%, Byron Brown 39%. So much less blitzing, which I do think you kind of see, right? Like they're not really trying to generate pressures with their defense. Like you said earlier, they're focused more on coverage and bracketing receivers and being sound in that regard. Again, luckily, this offensive line doesn't put Carson Beck in many pressure situations. But can UF afford to let Carson be his best? Because he is at his best when he has time to operate, because he will find that open receiver. So that cat and mouse game is going to be interesting, and obviously, there's going to be points when Florida does put pressure on Beck. How do those decisions look? The other thing I'm looking at, Gabby, is red zone touchdown efficiency on both sides. Um, Gators are scoring touchdowns in the red zone at a 66% clip. The UF defense is allowing a red zone touchdown rate of only 16%. That's elite. Miami's offense is scoring a red zone touchdown at 78.5%, so better than Florida's offense. And the defense is allowing a red zone touchdown at a 50% clip. I will say, like, this is worth bringing up too, because, we talked about Notre Dame, right? Being a talented team. In that game, Miami, frankly, lost the red zone battle in that game to Notre Dame on both sides. Notre Dame's offense went 3 for 3 on red zone touchdowns, and the Miami offense went 2 for 4 on red zone touchdowns. Now, luckily, Miami had a couple of explosive touchdowns from outside the red zone, but if this game is close, Miami needs to do a much better job in this area in the red zone. And I think just in general, too, like even if it's not close, I think the separation starts happening because Miami is able to get it done in the red zone on both sides of the ball. And then just the other thing I want to see, man, we've kind of talked about this, but like just follow the blueprint on defense that USF and LSU showed you. If the approach ain't broke, don't fix it. When DJ Lagway's at his best, he's pushing the ball downfield, picking up chunk plays. So you got to make him just be deliberate and in sync and work the ball methodically downfield. We've talked about how the outside receivers, it seems like a decent step back right now with Dallas Wilson out in terms of being able to push the ball deep and outside in that regard. So USF and LSU played a lot of too high safety looks and just forced Florida to methodically work the ball down the field, which I think they did. And once they got in the red area, kind of disasters happen in the form of turnovers and or penalties, knocking them off schedule. And also too, like if you're going to run two high safeties and Billy Napier isn't going to make you pay by putting the ball in Jaden Baugh's hands and running the ball into those light boxes, then just play two high safeties against them. Um, confidence issues, accuracy issues are plaguing DJ Lagway right now. LSU also did a lot of a good job of like split coverages. So on one half, they'd show like cover two, on the other half, they'd show cover four or various other coverages. And I think that really messed with DJ, baiting him into bad decisions all game long. I don't think Corey Heatherman needs to reinvent the wheel here. Just kind of follow that blueprint and look. If UF changes their approach, then you have to change. But to me, man, we've talked about like UF's offense to me requires a lot of precision, rub routes, timing, high-low concepts, screens. And right now, their quarterback just isn't precise. And so they need to defend all those little screens too and come up and tackle. But um, on defense, it's a copycat sport. I would just copy what LSU and USF are doing. I think you have the personnel to go do it. And those are the three things I would watch. Is there anything that stands out to you that you're interested in from a Miami standpoint?
For me, a lot of it just kind of falls into kind of keeping DJ Lagway in this mental headspace, right? Just keep him kind of rattled, keep him guessing, keep him in a place where he's unsure, where you got to kind of continue to rattle the cage with DJ Lagway, because if he breaks out of this and if they set something up for him that helps him kind of start making those developments where he's becoming efficient and he's, making these throws and all that stuff, like that could lead to, a spark from this UF offense. I think Corey Heatherman, I'm not worried about it. I think he does a great job on defense, and I'm sure they have a great,
Yeah.
plan for all of this. But I think Miami needs to kind of continue to keep DJ Lagway on his toes and continue to find ways to, uh, you know, make him make these mistakes, continue to force him into these turnover prone situations. And again, I think that that's in the bag for Corey Heatherman and this defense. Like, I think that's on the table for them to just continue to make things difficult. So yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing. And then on offense, you got into, you mentioned a lot of, like, obviously the the really important, like the red, the stuff in the red zone, and Carson Beck and being pressured. Just for me, simply, it's just like, is Miami going to be able to run the ball on this team? Like, how is Miami going to be able to kind of test this interior defensive line, especially that it's
I don't think you
depleted?
need to. I think you pass it against this team.
Yeah,
That's just me.
I'm just curious what it's going to look like. Mark Fletcher's coming off a really good game, and would like to. I'm sure they would like to be balanced, and I'm sure they're going to want
Yeah.
to run the ball. So how effective are you going to be able to be running the ball against this team? I want to test kind of like that interior defensive line for Florida and see what that looks like, how those guys hold up, because there are going to be some guys that are going to have to step up and play larger roles. In a situation like this. So how are some of those guys going to hold up? And with how physical Miami wants to be up front, um, just how effective are you going to be able to kind of break? I mean, I don't think LSU ran for 100 yards on this
Right.
Florida defense. I think they had like 96 yards rushing, and USF, they ran for like 128 yards, and most of those came from Byron Brown. So I think it's an opportunity for Miami to just kind of continue to establish that dominance on the line of scrimmage by running the football, which again I think is just a part of their identity. So I think it's fair to expect them to want to run the ball hard against this team. And I think doing so effectively would just help. You mentioned the time of possession and how Florida's controlled the clock. Like Miami's kind of controlled the clock too in their games, David. I don't know, you might have the stat, you might not, but I feel like Miami's done a good job of kind of having the football lock too. So I'm sure they want to win that part of it too. And Mark Fletcher again. I'm curious to see how if he can kind of stack onto this performance, another really good win against Florida.
To me, I would pass the ball to run. I
Yeah,
I think you're gonna be able to pass because I think unless they start blitzing like crazy and heating you up, I think Carson Beck's gonna have all day, and I think you lean into that. And then once you get that going, then you control the clock with some run game. But to me, you pick at their significant weakness, which is rushing the
the
passer.
last lack of pass rush.
Yeah. Uh, how about a matchup you like the most? Transition. Like I like Miami's pass protection against the UF
Yeah.
pass rush. That's what I would pick.
Yeah, no, and I think that on the opposite side, like I know they kind of attach the tight ends to the tackles, but I think Miami's edge rushers can. I still like that group. I think that's an elite group, and I think both sides of the line of scrimmage, there's a potential advantage. And look, I think just Ruben Bain has like game wrecker potential right now. Like I think he's just in that zone. So I like Ruben Bain against whoever it is that he's going up with. I know Austin Barber's good. I know I think there's again question marks on the right side. If Miami can kind of get some of these matchups with Messidor or Bain, I still think that Miami's pass rushers can be really really effective in a game like this.
Matchup to keep an eye on from a concern standpoint, or something to keep an eye on in general with this game. Like to me, just in general, like I think this game gets a lot more interesting and a lot more dangerous if Florida is able to clean up their turnover issues,
Hmm.
their penalty issues. Like, what if Billy Napier leans more on Jaden Baugh than DJ Lagway? What if DJ Lagway makes good decisions and protects the football? As it relates to the USF game, what if the receivers clean up the drops?
Hmm.
What if, again, the penalties get cut down? So, to a certain extent, like improving on all of this in 1 week just seems kind of unlikely
Yeah.
because this kind of seems ingrained to who Florida is,
Yeah.
unfortunately for them. But if UF cleans up a lot of these things, this is going to be an interesting game.
Yeah, a lot of the self-inflicted wounds, because again, it's happened on touchdown plays. So many touchdowns have been called off the board for penalties, and then the drops, and all that stuff. I think just a concern too. Again, I'm a believer in this Florida defense. Like, what if what if the coverage is just good and they do a good job of kind of making things difficult for Carson Beck, and Miami's passing game isn't as efficient as it has been before, and Miami's in a situation where they're kind of pressing, in the passing game, and that can cause, potential situations too with Carson Beck and turnovers and all that stuff. So I think if this if this Florida defense is comes out and just plays a really really strong game, like I think that could create a ton of problems for Miami on offense. I think especially in the secondary with the way that those guys are able to play.
How about a player that needs to step up? I'm not gonna overthink it. I'm just gonna say Carson Beck
Hmm.
because I think if Carson protects the football, Miami wins. To me, it's just kind of that simple.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I think just on the defensive side too, like my thing is just like who's gonna kind of be the playmaker back there, right? Like again, there's gonna be if there's opportunities to make plays, like who's it gonna be? Who's someone that needs to kind of step up and make some of those plays? And like a guy like Zechariah Poyser comes to mind as far as just like whether it be in them running the ball and having to kind of stop Jaden Ball if they lean on him a little bit more, just being a guy who's around the football in some of these passing situations where you need to kind of go find it. In that LSU game, you see AJ Halsey and obviously different players, but he makes just such an impressive play right up the middle of the field where he kind of just instinctually comes downhill and picks off a ball, kind of cuts right in front of Vernell Brown and picks off the ball. Like one of those game changing type of plays on defense that really can impact the way the flow of the game goes. That play was right before the half as UF was driving. Like, is there someone on the back end of Miami's defense that can come step up and make some of those plays? Zechariah Poyser is someone I would like to see kind of step up and make a play like that in a game like this.
How about a potential player of the game? I'm gonna go on the other side defensively. I'm gonna go, you could say Ruben Bain every week, so
Yep.
I'm gonna spice it up and go Akeem Mesidor. I think
Oof.
I think he could feast
Yep.
on the right tackle.
He might have a better matchup.
Yeah, yeah, depending, but yeah, I mean Jack Pyburn and Pat Payton, two
Hmm.
former Knowles and Gators, they got after it. I think Pyburn had 5 pressures against this Florida offensive line. Payton had 4 pressures against this offensive line. Caden Jones, the Florida right tackle, I think he allowed 5 or 6 pressures alone.
Yeah. He has six pressures allowed on the year, so.
Yeah. So I mean, again, I think Bane's going to go off. I'm just trying to say someone different.
Hmm.
And I think Mesidor's playing at an elite level as a pass
Yeah.
rusher right now. So
I
I'll highlight him.
saw the PFF grade too that he has like the highest win rate, like pass rush win
Does he?
rate. Yeah, I mean he's getting after it for sure. Yeah, I mean again, I think Ruben Bain is just in game record mode right now.
Yeah.
I think he's on a different level, so I will take the low hanging fruit,
Yeah.
but it's because I believe it. It's not just because it's a the popular, the cool thing to say. I think what he's doing right now is unbelievable, and I think he is kind of wired as one of those guys that wants to be wants to cement himself in games and situations like this. So, super excited to watch Ruben Bain play on Saturday.
All right. Prediction time. The line for this game, Miami is a 7.5 point favorite. Over under is 51.5. Um, my prediction, look, everyone who listens to this podcast regularly knows I don't like predicting large margins of victory. But for this game, man, I think Miami's gonna win fairly comfortably. I'm gonna go Miami 38, Florida 20.
Ooh.
I think Miami is just kind of a bad matchup for Florida. I think Miami can pass protect, obviously, and I think they'll be able to throw the ball around on this UF defense. So I think Miami's going to be able to score points on Florida. On the other side of the ball, I just don't know if Florida can execute their offense at a consistent rate to keep up with that scoring themselves. It's just kind of like a sloppy operation to this point. So, look, Florida does have talent. Um, to me, they're just kind of broken. They're a team that's been mismanaged by their head coach. And, that's why they're going to probably make a coaching change at some point this year. They look like a program that, I don't know. I don't know. They just kind of lack leadership to me. Like DJ Lagway is allowed to throw 5 picks in a game. Like that's an interesting conversation to have. Why
Hmm.
wouldn't you just pull him after 3 or 4 picks?
Hmm.
Um, Brendan Brett, we talked about that. Like he spits on a guy at USF and
You lose the game.
you lose the game in a large way because of that, and he gets to play the next week. Like
Hmm.
that's off to me. And then the Lagway injury stuff has also just been mismanaged all off season, and it's now derailing their season right now. And look, Billy Napier wants to be the play caller, and his offense is just not good. It's not good. So again, I think they're talented. I think their defense is talented. I would feel a little more worried from a Miami perspective if Florida actually had a pass rush, but they don't. So
Yeah.
Miami 38, Florida 20.
Yeah, not too far off of you. I went 34-20. So we're kind of in the same ballpark of just feeling like this is a two potential three score win at the end of the day. And look, I've said this, but I really do believe in this Miami team. I think it's extremely well put together. I think that this team is playing really hard. And again, in everything that I'm hearing, just in conversations that I'm having, this team is like just laser focused on this. Like they're not worried about anything else. And like Florida has their full 100% attention. I think we saw that last week with USF, with all the talk and all the chatter about USF, how they came out and just smacked them in the mouth from the jump. I think Miami is gonna take advantage of where Florida is weak right now. I think that this is kind of like a hunter's mentality, just kind of just pick at what's not working for you guys. And I think Miami has the systems in place to just capitalize on what they know Florida doesn't do well. And a lot of I just think personnel wise, everything, and I do have a lot of respect actually for this Florida team. If you can't tell, by especially with how they play defense, I do think it's a good defense. But I believe in Miami's offense way more than I believe in this Florida defense, and I think it's going to be efficient and effective. And I think Miami's going to have their way on Saturday.
So it'll be interesting. Again, 7:30 kickoff. Check out all the game day coverage on Saturday morning. Check out Gabby's recruiting coverage throughout the weekend. It's going to be a big week for the Hurricanes in general, on the field, off the field. It'll be a lot of fun. So appreciate everyone for listening. And until next time, take care.